It's Friday, the 20th of May. From our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg to the rest of the African continent. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock. We're also streaming live on YouTube, with the entire show now available on our YouTube channel. Today, we focus on the announcement by the SABC that it will from now on play 90% of local music on its 18 radio stations to ensure that local content are prioritized and to reflect the diversity of all our South African cultures. So the question that we pose to you today is, more than a week of listening to local music on SABC radio stations, are you thrilled, happy, joyful, pleased? Are you ecstatic about the latest developments? I want to know from you on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on our Facebook page. But first, let's take a look at your news headlines. Members of the Fort Hare alumni says they are looking forward to today's celebrations. The Constitutional Court to hold a special retirement ceremony for Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke. And ANC Chief Whip Jackson Tembu says the DA and the EFF are attempting to sabotage the passing of the budget and engaging in thuggery tactics. Now, those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. A very good morning to you, Kendall. Oh, well, if that is the case, let's then go to wherever we need to go, because I can't hear anything. It seems like we're going to do the sport headlines. Let's cross back to Kendall.
To be African is beautiful. To be African is a privilege.
It represents hard work. It represents being able to stand on your own.
And respecting other cultures as well.
It's about promoting African heritage.
We are all Africans. Let's come together so that we can have a formidable force.
Our cultures interlink with one another.
And by standing together and embracing one another, there's power in unity.
It is time to cut off this issue of xenophobia.
I stand for African unity. I stand for promoting unity in Africa, because
there are many opportunities
to be whatever you want to be.
Africa is one of the most important continents.
Because if we can come together as one, we will be able to actually build a better Africa, the new Africa for the future.
And if we unite our hearts and our minds together and we go forward, we will conquer.
So let us all arise and be proudly African.
Being an African is who I am right now.
I'm proudly African. I love Africa.
Wishing you all a very happy Africa Month.
One love.
How does this extreme heat affect basic conditions of living?
Food spoils more readily, and the risk of food poisoning outbreaks or food poisoning in a household.
Should we experience another heat wave soon, and it's coming?
First sign is always thirst. Thirst is a sign that already your body started to be dehydrated, and that's a very early sign that most people will be able to sort of pay attention to and then act on. That doesn't warrant any serious medical attention. But the minute that you start to feel slightly nauseous, that you start to feel dizzy, that's a sign that you need to stop what you're doing, get out of the sun, get into a cool area, slow down your intensity, get hydrated, a cool down.
Join Dr. Sello Mutawung every Saturday from 9 till 10 in the morning.
Right, welcome back. Now, just before we get on with the rest of the show, let's bring you what's coming up in sports today.
We want to give as many players as we can an opportunity
to come and play here.
Mashaba announces his squad to face Gambia in an AFCON qualifier and is forced to defend his selections again.
The competition is tough, but you don't focus on your competitors, you focus on your own race.
As excitement for the Olympic Games bubbles over, sprinter Karina Horn looks forward to her Diamond League meet in Morocco on Sunday.
I appreciate that it's not a politically correct decision, but we are a members' club and we have the right to decide our own membership policy.
An iconic Mirfield golf course gets removed from the list of hosts for the British Open after it votes to not admit female members. My name is Kendall Makhamat and I'll be bringing you all of that and more in a sports bulletin about 10:20 or so. For now, back to the main desk for the
University of Fort Hare celebrating 100 years. It's a centenary celebration. Now, members of the Fort Hare alumni says that they are looking forward to today's celebrations. President Jacob Zuma and Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe are expected to address the delegates, the alumni, students and the public in general. This report by Aldrin Sampier.
It's a rich legacy. 5 presidents came from this institution. Nelson Mandela, Botswana's first democratic president Cyril Ramaphosa, President Julius Nyerere of the United Republic of Tanzania, the first president of the Republic of Zambia, Kenneth Kaunda, and Zimbabwe's President Robert Mugabe. The alumni stretches wide, from politics to business, sports and the judiciary.
I can't forget Charles Newpin, Paul Pretorius. It was those group of those people. On the other hand, we had a powerful SASO, where the president was Themba Sono, we had Harry Nengwe Kulu, we had fiery speakers. Also on the other side, we had Steve Biko. They understand that the influence of these different ideas was energizing us as students.
They are among a long list of men and women who carved Fort Hare's niche, student activism. After all, this is the political school of the likes of the PAC's Robert Sobukwe and the longest-serving ANC president O.R. Tambo. Throughout the generations, student activism at Fort Hare has remained vibrant.
The culmination of that was a remarkable manifesto written by the students. The opening words of that manifesto says, "We, the students of Fort Hare, having exhausted all possible means of communication and meet with diluted frustration, we hereby resolve." And we resolve that, if they don't change, we're not going to classes. The first day, we submitted the memorandum. Second day, third day, the Sky police came to arrest all of us. They were beating us in the dormitories.
There were lots of activism. I was on the other side. There was lots of activism in terms of people clamoring for better educational facilities.
What we need to do is to learn from universities like Fort Hare, to learn from the Walter Sisulu universities, because for the past 10 years or more, they have really been now asking the critical questions of what is the purpose of university? What kind of graduates are we churning out? What is supposed to be the content of the information we're giving our students? What does the curriculum look like? What kind of a student do we want to graduate from our universities? Because 10, 15 years ago, students were graduating from Fort Hare and not being employed.
Ironically, throughout the generations, the issues have remained the same.
There were problems inside the university itself, where there was issues about accommodation, there's issues about the food, issues about the allocation of courses.
Sometimes there were what I would say mundane, where students complained about the food, the accommodation, But there were times when there were serious issues that pertaining to the political situation in the country.
Students were struggling with paying for their fees, they were struggling with paying for accommodation, they were struggling with paying for food, with paying for textbooks. Most of them came from schools that spoke Xhosa as the primary language, and the medium of instruction at Fort Hare was English.
Student activism here at the University of Fort Hare has taken a violent turn. It has become synonymous with violence, and this is what we saw during violent protests, during the Fees Must Fall protests. And it seems as though that compromise is not on the cards for these students. And the options of the likes of Irvin Khoza of staging a stay away is not what these students are willing to go for. Have they really reached the level of no compromise? In 2006, Nomsa Mazwai became the first female SRC president here at Fort Hare, and she maintains Fort Hare and other higher education institutions face a critical challenge. The question is, will Fort Hare live up to the challenge? Aldrin St-Pierre, SABC News, the University of Fort Hare.
Staying with Fort Hare for the latest on the centenary celebrations, we now cross live to Tommy Dixon, who is monitoring the developments for us from Fort Hare. Tommy, a very good morning to you and welcome. What is happening there?
Well, thank you very much. Good morning and welcome to these hallowed grounds at Fort Hare University in Alice. We are on the banks of the majestic river of Kyume, very well known in this region. The ground that produced leaders, the ground that produced business people. It's an academic institution, very illustrious. Today it celebrates 100 years of existence. We're about now to see those celebrations getting underway. As you can see the choir behind me, beautiful songs that all of them seek to celebrate this illustrious and iconic institution. It's going to be a very beautiful day as far as we can see the preparations going. It's going to be a memorable day. If you look at the list of the speakers and the guests that are expected here, it's going to be a day to remember. But to tell us more about all of this is the Minister in the Presidency and who is also the chairperson of the Inter-Ministerial Committee that has been looking at these celebrations, organizing them in terms of everybody who's going to be here and the guests that are expected and everything that is going to be done here. It's been resting on the shoulders of Mr. Jeff Khadebe. Minister, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We really appreciate this time. How do you feel as we now about to see the program begins in terms of celebrating this illustrious history of this iconic institution?
It's a very exciting moment. 100 years of University of Fort Hare that has produced such sterling leaders of our liberation struggle, not only in South Africa but on the African continent. On this day, I think of icons such as Professor Z.K. Matthews, who was the first graduate of this university, a man who played a pivotal role in the adoption of the Freedom Charter. In fact, the clarion call to draft the Freedom Charter came from Z.K. Matthews. I think of people like Robert Mugabe, the president of Zimbabwe. I think about the late Nsumu Mkhehle, the Prime Minister of Lesotho, of Cyril Sekama of Botswana, our own icon, Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, Robert Sobukwe. So these are the men and women who produce the giants of our liberation struggle, came from this university.
Now, when you were putting together the program to celebrate this centenary, what were the considerations that you had to take into account?
We had to take into account that this is a historic university. We need to leave a legacy for posterity. Also, to what is very important as well, we need to ensure that some of those infrastructure like the Z.K. Matthews House is preserved. We need to make sure that the students of 2016 should know the history of this university. That is why documentaries that are being posted on television, SABC, and on social media will play a critical role of ensuring that we enrich the history of this university so that we can be able to attain this Agenda 2063 as well.
But also you had to maintain its historical significance as an institution that was not only accommodating students from South Africa but also outside of the borders of this country.
Yes, indeed. As you know, that this was the only university where Africans can come here, but it had always had a non-racial character until 1959 when this Extension of University Act was passed by the apartheid regime, where it now was designated as the so-called Xhosa-speaking university. But that doesn't damper the history of this university. It has produced giants, not only in politics, but also in business and in administration. So we need to ensure that that legacy lives on.
Now, what's going to be the highlight of this day in terms of the speakers who are going to be here?
Well, there are many prominent personalities that are going to be here. The chairperson of the African Union Commission, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, will be making remarks, as well as the alumnus of this university, President of the Republic of Zimbabwe, His Excellency Robert Mugabe, and our President, His Excellency Jacob Zuma, will be making a keynote address. But there will also be other facilitations, such as University of South Africa, which will be represented by Dr. Mabizela, and also the students of this university. It is, in fact, a very momentous occasion.
Minister, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
All right, man. That's Minister Jeff Radebe, is the chairperson of the Inter-Ministerial Committee that has been organizing these centenary celebrations. There are about over 3,000 people that are actually expected to be here just inside the campus, and accommodation has been made possible for that. And it's quite going to be a memorable day. We're now going to cross to my colleague Aldrin St-Pierre, who is also inside the venue where these celebrations are going to be held. Aldrin, over to you.
Well, Tommy, tell you what, just listening to the choir there performing right behind you guys yesterday as well I went onto YouTube and listened to the choir, and my personal favorite song is Seker Bosik Wil Jou Hê, so I hope that they do perform that song eventually when the formal program gets underway. But as you can see, that everything has been set up. Most guests have arrived and made their way here, and as you indicated earlier on, that about 3,000 guests expected to fill up this hall. But one thing that we cannot shy away from is the violent protest that started on Tuesday and went all the way into Wednesday. And the Inter-Ministerial Committee that Minister Jeff Radebe is part of has indicated that the number of police officers here has been increased. Yesterday when we spoke to the Minister of Police, Nathi Nhleko, did indicate that 133 police officers were initially deployed here, but they decided to upscale that number to ensure that this proceedings go underway undisrupted. You know that some students have been saying that the centenary will not go ahead, but as you can see, that everything has been put in place to ensure that the centenary goes ahead. And of course, President Jacob Zuma is expected to deliver the keynote address. And just looking at all the people making their way here, former students as well, and it's a level of excitement. It almost reminds me of the time I had my matric reunion, and just looking at all the former students hugging and kissing each other, and really quite excited to see each other again. And these are some of the students here in the blazers, the yellow and black blazers. So if you can just quickly come and join me here. This is a former student as well from this institution, but also you used to work here at this institution.
Oh yes. Do I speak English?
Yes, just tell us about the time that you've spent here at this institution, not only as a student, but also as a worker here.
Oh, from long ago, 1960s, when there were only a small ratio of students, male students, to the girls. Very few hundreds, there are hundreds at that time. But it was a very disciplined institution. When you came here and walked the grounds of Fort Hare, we felt like we were in heaven. It was heavenly. There was discipline. People were well dressed. Our lecturers were well dressed. They would wear ties like I do when they lectured to us. Everything was so highly disciplined.
What are some of the exciting moments that you still think about?
Well, the mass meetings of students discussing very important issues of the country. There are various organizations, political organizations of various formations, all the PACs, ANCs, non-European Union movement. Everybody was here discussing the situation in the country, because at that time, those were very exciting times, especially in the 60s, because people were beginning to go out into other countries, because things were very hot here, because there was great oppression. So we were discussing how to get out of this situation. It was very exciting in those formations.
Who are the former students, quite prominent students, that you now look up to and say, probably let's say the likes of O.R. Tambo? I don't know if you got the opportunity, probably if you spent some time with them as well.
No, we only heard about them. We were excited about those people. We read about them. We read about all the leaders of the movement. We were excited just to hear about them. They used to motivate the fact that they were working for us. They were fighting for our freedom. That used to motivate us also to get into care and fight for our freedom in the country. Yes.
Well, certainly this institution has a long list of prominent politicians. Some have gone on to become statesmen. And right now, I'm also joined by a former student. And fortunately, he still works here at the institution. And you're part of the International Student Management Forum at this institution. Just basically, before we get into the nitty-gritties about your memories, just tell us quickly about that forum, the International Students Forum.
Well, the international students it's not international students as such. It's actually internationalization of higher education with various components, including the student component, international student component. Basically, the university is part of a movement to internationalize, so as to improve the diversity of teaching and learning as well as research. And it's a movement that seeks to embrace the universally accepted ideals, which are about tolerance of differences, which are about promoting cultural diversity and language diversity, which is about harmony and at higher education. It also serves to provide a conducive environment for the international programs to take place. University of Fort Hare is an affiliate of International Education Association of South Africa, which serves to benchmark as well as to uniformize and standardize approaches to international education, and also to mobilize its resources internationally. That is basically it. It happens at two levels. One, at policy level, which is at institutional policy, and at national level, which is the national policy, which informs and guides how institutions should internationalize.
Okay, then perfect. Well, we will continue with the coverage of the Fort Hare centenary celebrations right here in the University of Fort Hare in Alice. And we will be speaking to former students as well as the alumni. And have you seen that package earlier on where we spoke to Makaziwa Mandela, who are part of those students who are part of this institution as well. So we will be speaking to more and more of them. Of course, the program is expected to start round about at 11 o'clock, and President Jacob Zuma is expected to deliver the keynote address, but also that anticipation of the arrival of the President of Zimbabwe, Robert Mugabe. It's back to you guys in studio.
University of Fort Hare celebrations 100 years today. We'll be crossing to the venue live a little bit later, so you have to stay tuned. You don't want to miss it. Meanwhile, a special ceremonial session will be held at the Constitutional Court today for Deputy Justice, Chief Justice that is, Dikgang Moseneke. The Deputy Chief Justice will be retiring from the bench at the end of the month. Now, as you can recall, Moseneke joined the highest court in 2002. And 3 years later, he was appointed the Deputy Chief Justice. A little bit of background and history. At the age of 15, Moseneke became the country's youngest political prisoner, serving 10 years on Robben Island, where he managed to pass his matric examinations before enrolling and graduating with BA and B Juris degrees while in prison. He later completed his LLB, also with UNISA. Judge Moseneke spoke passionately about the importance of good education, service to society, and family values and support in particular during his acceptance speech 4 years ago. Now, a massive search is underway for the wreckage. We'll go to that particular proceedings as well a little bit later. We'll see if we can find our reporter to connect to him, Tamole Mashlauli. He's on the scene and he'll give us an update on the ceremony a little bit later, so stay tuned. Now, a massive search is underway for the wreckage of an Egypt airplane that disappeared from the radar screens over the Mediterranean yesterday. The Egyptian government now says that no wreckage has been found after reports that debris had been spotted in the sea. The Airbus A320 with 66 people on board was flying from Paris to Cairo when it vanished without sending a distress signal. Egyptian authorities say the plane's disappearance may have been an act of terrorism. The disaster has raised fears of a repeat of a bombing of a Russian passenger jet by the Islamic State group over Egypt in October that killed all 224 people on board. Now, here's our theme for today, and of course we're asking you a good question around this, and this is about 90% music being played on all our radio stations. I'd like to find out from you if you're happy, are you elated, are you ecstatic, are you feeling good about 90% of local music being played on all our radio stations. Let us know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom as well as on the Facebook page. But there's more good news for creatives in the local industry. The public broadcaster, the SABC, will increase royalties from 3.2 to 4%. Remember, it was 3.2%, so 8% more that goes to, in fact, 0.8% more takes it to 4%. Now, SABC CEO Hlaudi Moseneke made the announcement at a meeting with different sector role players. The SABC will set a budget to honour the SA music legends such as Babsi Mlangeni, Steve Kakana, Letta Mbuli, and many of those others that have passed on, amongst others, for their contribution to the industry. That recognition will be held in July.
The 90% local music content was widely hailed. Now, another boost.
With immediate effect, the percentage will be 4%.
Music to ears all round.
We cannot stop celebrating, and we really timelessly being amazed by the good news that we are always receiving from our broadcaster. It's really it's unbelievable. It's more than what we expected.
We have been paying them 3.2 royalties. Now we are moving from 3.2 to 4%, which we are going to pay as SABC. It is good news because now artists will get more money in their pockets. People won't die poor. So for us, it is a good journey that we are beginning.
There is no way I think we can thank the SABC enough on this thing. And I think, to me, it's as I said, transformational decision.
It's hoped it will open more doors.
I don't think SABC understands what it has done in terms of job creation, and you are not celebrating it enough. Honestly speaking, we think we're celebrating in this roundtable, but this is real victory. It's more victorious than winning the World Cup and whatever. You guys just don't understand what it means to that musician that has been there and that people are laughing at in the streets. They're now going to get paid. You just don't have an idea what you've done to people's lives, and there's more that you can do. Marketing, whoever, go out there and celebrate. This is the biggest victory for musicians in their lifetime. This is the real economic freedom in our lifetime.
From the golden oldies to contemporary hits, all guaranteed maximum airtime on public radio stations. Artists are to compose a special song as a gesture of appreciation
It's not enough, therefore, such a monumental decision taken by Saud and his leadership to say thank you verbally, thank you, thanks, or issue a card with flowers. No. I think these people who celebrate in song and they've started, putting this into it. So the cake is in the oven.
90% local music, that's what we're playing in studio. We have our guest this morning, Mr. Kaiser Kanyaho, SABC spokesperson. A very good morning to you, sir, and welcome.
Good morning, and good morning to your viewers.
Now, I see you were rocking to the music, listening back and taking you back in time. I mean, it was a wonderful period for that type of music, and it's coming back.
No, definitely it was, and it's something that we need to appreciate, to say our people have got talent, and let us revive that talent that has always been there, and also give an example to young people about what has been happening so that they can perfect it.
Yes. We're going to come back to your reaction in terms of the 90% music so far, but let's hear some of the views that we found on the street about what people think about the SABC's decision. Let's see if we can get that up. Well, it seems like we've lost it for a second, but what has been the reaction so far with the 90% of local music being played on our stations?
From our side, I think a lot of people are praising the SABC for making this bold decision. And some of the people are saying it's revolution that is happening. And we appreciate all the goodwill messages that we are getting. For the first time in so many months, all political parties in Parliament agreed on one thing, that this is the best thing that has ever happened to the SABC. And for us to be able to be in that space, it's a good thing.
Let's hear what the people have to say. Let's go live.
My experience, in a positive level, it's a good experience because I think it has taken me back to my roots, because I was taken back to a world which I'm not used to, but now I'm back to my roots, my African roots. So yeah,
it opens up an opportunity for our local artists to actually explore more with different genres. And in a sense, it has shown us basically that we are lacking when it comes to a variety of genres in South Africa alone.
I don't think a 10% quota is a good idea, because 90% is a lot. And not a lot of people actually do listen to local music, which is a problem in a way. But I think it's more of a problem if you bring it in at 90% rather than gradually introducing it, because people might just not stop listening to that radio station or all radio stations because they don't enjoy that.
I'm really happy with it. It gives people a chance to get on radio and get their stuff heard. And we have a lot of local artists who have quality. I just don't think they have been put on proper platforms besides your SoundClouds and stuff like that. But yeah, otherwise I'm really happy with it. I think what just needs to get better is the quality of the music.
I think it's a good thing. I'm an upcoming artist, so I feel like they give us a platform to get our music out there, especially on radio stations. It's like a good thing. So I have no problem with it, because I mean, with international music, we get it on the internet, we can download it, we can pay for it over the internet. So I feel like South Africa needs more local music to be played on their stations.
I think it's a good thing for our local artists. I think it's also going to encourage them to produce better music, better quality sounds, and also videos. I think it's just a bit of a big compromise, as there's a lot of repetition on most radio stations. So I tend to switch, flip between radio stations a lot, just to try get a better mix of a variety of music.
I think the 90-10% is a bit excessive. I would have probably moved more to a 50-50 split. It would have introduced the South African genres, but it would have also kept in touch with international genres. By going straight 10%, that's 1 out of every 10 songs would have been international. And South Africa has been playing, I think, every 8 out of 10 songs being international versus... So I think it might be a big jump, but yeah, it helps the music industry. It is bringing in extra funding towards South African and local artists. I mean, South Africa does need to start competing on an international stage.
Well, that's our producer that went out on the street, Giffen Gobeni, finding out what the people have to say on the ground. Mixed views, if I can put it on a scale, 100 out of 90% was positive and 10% a little bit negative. Your views on that, sir?
No, definitely. And obviously, people are not used to this. Therefore, with time, we would not even be having this debate, because people would be knowing that this is how we do things. Because at the end of the day, the reason why people believe that international music is better than us is because they were getting more airplay than the local artists. Therefore, if the opposite happens...
Was there a model that you've copied either on the continent or internationally where local music actually took over from where international music is being played on the airwaves?
We do not want to be copying anyone. But when you travel all over the world, you will know that you go to America itself. The so-called international music, when they are in America, they are local. They are playing local music. Therefore, at the end of the day, America in itself play their own local music.
Yes.
You go to Europe, they do the same. You go to India, you go to Nigeria, you go to Zimbabwe. They play their own music. And that is the only way that they can develop this industry and make sure that it is viable, but not only for the industry, but also for job creations, because you must understand that when you create new songs and whatever, and they are hits, there are going to be a need for video. The people who are doing videos will then get more jobs if we are creating the jobs in this industry with what we are doing.
The issue and the question of quality seems to come up quite a lot in some of the interviews we had there. What measures have you put in place to make sure that the 90% that we are playing is really quality local content?
I will start by saying that we have got good quality musicians in this country. We've got the Miriam Makebas of this world. We've got the Mafiki Zolos of this world. Quality is there. All we are saying is there is this perception that it is not enough.
Yes.
Therefore,
do we have enough, though?
I believe we do, but we can do better. And I've always said to the musicians out there, we can only work together on this. We can only do our part, which we have done. They must do their part by producing more music, good quality. They mustn't just go and shoot their videos on the cell phone and expect them to be on television, because there's a certain quality that we need to put together. At the end of the day, I believe that working together with the music industry, who have promised by now that they are going to do that, we are going to get this right. And by 10 years down the line, people will be thinking it's normal.
We've increased the royalties now from the SABC side for the musicians from 3.2 to 4%. Is that maybe a measure to make sure that we do have that quality and the quantity that we're looking for?
Definitely. We were told that the royalties have not been increased for the past 30 years. Therefore, yesterday when we had a meeting with the industry people, the collecting agencies, the idea for the meeting, the reason for the meeting was to say, let us have a place where we can talk about these issues. And one of the first decisions was that we are going to increase from 3.25 to about 4% to make sure that we encourage even those people that are not registered with the collecting agencies to go and register, but also to make sure that we don't continue to have musicians dying poor, because that is not helping the industry. The young people are not going to be afraid to get into the industry, because they will think, why get into this industry and then later on I don't have anything. Therefore, for us, it is a big part of what we are trying to do in developing the industry and making sure that at the end of the day we'll be proud, like other countries are proud of their musicians. We will be proud of our own musicians. Because
if I think back in Nigeria, I know when they introduced their local music, there was a big storm around it, but people are happy about it now. I mean, a number of years later, but it proves to you that local music can work.
Definitely. We have got that experience as the SABC. When we introduced local dramas and whatever on television, people started saying, no, the advertisers will move, and that happened for a while. But later on, when people started getting used to this, now the biggest money spinners are local content. And you can see that with time, people will forget about what has happened.
But there is a couple of questions around this, because the question is, how sustainable is it, number one? And are you not maybe afraid that sponsors and advertisers might be pulling out because it's 90% local only?
We believe that advertisers will always follow the people. That is why we are making a very serious call to the public of South Africa to support us on this. Because if there are numbers on our radio stations, advertisers have got no choice but to come to those numbers. We are going to be having road shows where we are going to engage with the advertisers to explain our decision, because our decision is not only on music, it is also going to manifest itself from the 1st of July on television, where we are getting about 80% local content on television. And they must understand that it is to protect our heritage and make sure that we move forward. And they will have to understand that this is a decision we have made and we'll keep to it.
I heard 3 months. It's going to be a sort of period when you sort of review it. Is that going to be the time period, and what's going to happen?
Yeah, there was a misunderstanding about that. We were saying that this is a decision is made. The decision is not made only for 3 months. It is made, but like in any other business, every quarter we review.
Yes.
Therefore, we'll review and see what happens. But the decision is made is 90% local, 10% international, forever.
Mr. Kanyaho, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And local is lekker.
Local will always be lekker. Thank you.
There we go. Mr. Kaiser Kanyaho, SABC spokesperson, in studio with us. We're asking you that question. Remember, it's on your screen right now. What do you make of it? Are you happy? Are you elated? Are you joyful at this 90% of local music being played on your radio station? I want to find out from you. We'll read your comments as we continue on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on the Facebook page. If you like us there, you become part and parcel of the Informed here on Newsroom. This is Channel 404. Let's now take a look at what's happening on social media today, and we start off with top trends of the hour. Hashtag William Nicol traffic in the area this morning is causing heavy delays. As you can see there on the map, it shows you all the red stripes. That's where the delays are. That coming from hashtag William Nicol. And then hashtag missing miners, the body of one of the 2 miners trapped in Impala. Hashtag platinum mine following a rock fall has been discovered by rescue teams. As you can see, the miners coming out there, hashtag missing miners. And there's also a hashtag for Fort Hare. And they're celebrating the 100th anniversary or the centenary celebrations today. Our reporter at Peter Ndoro is at that event today. Here's a picture of him with the Minister Naledi Pandor, as well as a big group selfie with some Fort Hare students in the back. See there they are. At the back there, they have been some student protests in the past 2 days, as you know, but the university has a court order against protesting students who have threatened to disrupt the events happening there today. And now this tweet comes from this one from Simpiwe. It says here, it appears that most roads between East London and Alice are barricaded by angry protesters. Hashtag Fort Hare centenary celebrations. Let's then move on to hashtag Egypt Air. It says there's still a lot of speculation as to what happened to the missing Egyptian Airbus MS-804. Debris has still not been found, but teams are still searching for answers. There was conflicting reports yesterday that it was found. And then, just to wrap up the trends of the week, now these graphs, you'll see the next one coming up by Roy Africa show, that some of the biggest stories of the week are Zuma Q&A, as well as Pravin Gordhan, the EFF brawl in Parliament, and Fort Hare. Can you see all the big blocks there? And then, of course, in the international section, it shows the usual U.S. presidential candidates take the usual place. That's Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, and as you can see, there are the big blocks there. And then the Olympics, Aleppo, the Cannes Film Festival, as well as the Chibok Girls and Egypt Air, all form part of the international news there. That's your social media pages. The pick of the day comes from outside at Justine Matthew and says, Moseneke's legacy will forever remain with the Constitutional Court. Farewell, Justice. That one there. Lovely picture. There's the picture of the Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke. He's leaving today. He's retiring. And we'll be crossing to that event a little bit later live, so you have to stay tuned. Let's now take a look at some of the comments that of the day. This one from Hotsticks, Sipo Hotsticks Mabuse. And it says, hashtag Fort Hare has indeed spawned greatness. We salute Fort Hare. Let's now take a short break. We'll be right back after.
Technology isn't all scary. There's also fun stuff like gaming.
Lots of women do play games, whether it's on their phones or their tablets.
Then there are Africans who are using new tools to make other people's lives much easier.
We typed the whole CV on a small, QWERTY Nokia phone.
For all these and other technology and social media news, join me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC News.
Your past should not determine your destiny if you make informed choices about your future.
I made a choice to leave the drugs, stop selling drugs, and going back to school.
Bophelong unleashes a chef who discovered his talent from doing cooking chores.
When you look at the church, there was chores that you have to do, and mine was cooking.
Our own chef made an excellent presentation when his recipe was chosen for MasterChef.
I've been to more than 10 countries, and there was always someone paying for my plane ticket. Someone see the potential in me.
For uplifting stories, join Puleng Mulibati every Friday at 17:30.
Welcome back. We cross now live to our reporter Tumale Mshlali, who's at the Constitutional Court, where I indicated to you earlier with a special ceremonial session for the Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke is expected to take place this morning. Tumale, very good morning to you, and it's over to you to tell us what is happening.
Well, thank you very much, Elvis. And of course, it's all systems go here at Constitutional Hill, at the Constitutional Court, where Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke is going to be delivering his last judgment. And we are joined, of course, by SABC COO, Mr. Hlaudi Moseneke, who was here yesterday at a very special function where he got to interact with the Deputy Justice. Mr. Moseneke, can you just let us know what does this mean for the judiciary in South Africa? Of course, we know the Deputy Chief Justice has had an integral part in also the crafting of the Constitution and in the history of the liberation struggle, having also been on Robben Island. You were here at the event yesterday. What were some of the sentiments that he shared?
I'm honored to be invited to this special occasion to do farewell for a special person, Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke. I was honored because I was also his special guest. I think it was good because, remember, I'm also in court matters. So it is good that really, as judges, they also show that they have humanity in them. And when they take decisions, they take these decisions considering the legality of the matters. They don't just take decisions because they want to take decisions.
And I don't know if you got any chance to speak to Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke, and what were some of his thoughts? What were some of the emotions that might be going through his mind and his heart as he steps down?
It was very interesting. I mean, as a judge and a well-respected judge, engaging with all other judges. I mean, we were just celebrating, really. I can't say much about what happened yesterday. I'm going to see what is going to happen today. But for us and other people, we are honored to be here to say farewell to a well-respected person in Judge Dikgang Moseneke. And we are all happy to be here. And as SABC, we are covering this live, which is good because we are a public broadcaster. This is a part of a mandate to show the case in South Africa that we have a very good constitutional court. We have very good system. Our courts are doing very well, all of them. It doesn't matter about the outcome of the courts. Either way, what is important is all of us, we should respect the rule of law.
Mr. Moseneke, we're going to have to leave it there. We see that the court is about to kick in now, and I'm going to let you go in and take your seat. We know that it is, of course, Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke's final judgment here, after which he will step down. And, of course, it's a very historic occasion with Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke having played a vital role in crafting the South African Constitution. And, of course, he's been one of the the most verbal and outspoken defenders of the Constitution, and sometimes it has also brought him in the firing line in terms of his own personal views about what has been happening with the South African Constitution, his criticisms of political organizations. This has brought him some criticism, but he's always been one man who has been lauded for being consistent and for being a principled leader, having, of course, been involved in the struggle for South Africa's liberation. Now, I'm going to have to hand it back to studio now. We are being told that any minute now the Constitutional Court will then, proceedings will begin here at Constitutional Hill, and we will be taking it live as Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke delivers this final ruling. With that, it's back to you in the studio.
Thank you to Mahole Mashlali. We'll probably cross to the Constitutional Court a little bit later, so you have to stay tuned. We'll also cross to Fort Hare a little bit later in the program as well. You don't want to miss any of this. It's a busy day here in the newsroom. But acclaimed South African musician Don Laka has welcomed a move by the SABC to play 90% local music on all our 18 radio stations. Earlier this year, Laka, who's the co-founder of the record label Kalawa Jasmi, posted a controversial message on his Facebook page. On the message, he claimed that an estimated 15,000 jobs have been lost in the South African music industry because local musicians aren't getting the airplay on national radio stations that is due to them. Meanwhile, South African Music Rights Organization, also known as SAMRO, hosted its first roundtable music industry forum on Wednesday to address what it is described as a divide in the sector. We're now joined here in studio by Don Laka, as well as the acting CEO, the current group CEO of SAMRO, Abe Sabia. Gentlemen, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Good morning. Good morning, President.
Don, let me start off with you. You've been very angry with the SABC at one stage because you said we're not playing any of your music and we're not, the South African musicians are not getting the airplay that they're supposed to get. What's your thoughts now after you received 90% airplay?
You know, it is remarkable because I think it all takes, as they say, two to tango. Mm-hmm. And I have arrived at the good time that I met with a person who was willing to listen. You know, you must know that this war has been waged since 1995, and the people who led it from the front, though some fell on the wayside. Mm-hmm. I had to come up with something that was completely different. Yeah. SABC wasn't very happy with me, by the way, and because I devoted all my efforts because I knew. Through these radio stations, 18 of them, reaching nearly 30 million. Yeah. That's where the fight has to be waged. And I did that, and fortunately, our first meeting with the COO, he sat in the meeting for 5 minutes, and already he has known what I've presented. Yes. And he said he has listened, and for the first time he has heard the plea of the artists. Mm-hmm. And the way I have presented that, because I came up with figures and I showed the plight of the South African musicians. I posted even my pay royalty statement, which a lot of people, weren't aware what the problems a lot of artists were facing. Mm-hmm. If you can imagine, I have nearly about 500 recorded songs, yes, which are registered with SAMRO. Mm-hmm. And I go and receive just a small amount of money. What about those who don't have the amount of records that I have? They were receiving nothing. Yes. So, the fight had to be fierce in order for me to be heard out there. Yes. And I'm glad that the CEO listened, and the next meeting, which he delayed by 2.5 months, yes, yielded results.
I look back December last year, we had a get-together at my place with some of the SABC staff members in our crew, and I played your song, and they said, we haven't heard that song for yonks. And I said, that is exactly it, because South African musicians don't get the airplay, but right now you're getting 90%. Your thoughts, Mr. Abe Sabia, on the 90% that SABC has now afforded to local musicians?
Well, thank you, Elvis, for this opportunity. Just a correction, I'm acting CEO of Group CEO of SAMRO.
Oh, not group. Yeah. Okay.
Acting CEO.
Oh,
yes.
Oh, acting group. Okay.
Well, the bigger question is, what does it translate into? Mm-hmm. This 90%. Obviously, there's jubilation all around. SAMRO represents the members who are composers, and also there are some members who are publishers. We stand at close to 14,000 now members this summer, and the numbers are growing. What it means for the composer is the day is different in that they will start seeing a little more return for their effort in the studio. It also means that if they study the terrain well, it means they have to be a little more free to be creative. It also means that they have to pay attention to their own personal administration of their music and their work. It also means that they have to start following their business, you know.
Yes.
But also it's an opportunity, because now you have so much time for airplay. You need to have variety. So Mr. Laka here, who is also a colleague in music, and I've worked with him in the past, and we've written many songs.
Yes.
He's a jazz musician, but he can do anything. Now, the kaleidoscope of the South African music landscape has to be filled with South African, traditional music, some gospel music, statamia, mbaqanga, everything you can think about coming, but being authentically true. We look for at Samro to make sure that the relationship between ourselves and SABC gets more oiled, in that we get proper reporting, so that we can translate this into cash into the pockets of artists, based on the 90%. And the other good news, of course, yesterday, as many will know, is that the radio royalty moved up to 4%, which is something worth celebrating, really, for the composers.
That's something I wanted to ask Mr. Laka, because 4% from 3.2, we heard from the spokesperson of the SABC earlier, for 30 years this has been the case.
You know, I said, the COO, I spoke to him early this morning. I said, I wrote him a text. I said, you know what, you continue giving us heart attacks, do you want to see us, walking the streets or in hospitals because of excitement? And, that is more welcome, because now it will see the returns coming back to us, staying with the artist. And this 4%, let me tell you, I know someone has been fighting for a very long time. And, it's been 30 years. 30 years. And this is another great milestone in actually less than 2 weeks. And South Africa's landscape has changed completely. The lives of musicians from next year will be singing a different tune.
Your 14,000 members, composers mainly. But what about the artists themselves? Who look after their interests? As Samro, you're looking after the composers.
Yeah, we do. We look after the composers, but when we did our round table 2 days ago, artists come there, because apart from the discussion on how can you earn a better royalty, how can you manage your business well, the other discussion is, when you get the money, look after the money. It also means that when you are successful, make sure that you. It doesn't mean that when you're successful you have to stop looking at the cents and the rands. That whole ecosystem needs to be well oiled, because then you'll see musicians coming out, making money out of this, and starting to invest in other things and becoming businessmen, and keeping it into the first, second, and third generation in the family. So the wealth remains there, and that's what it should mean.
Quality was mentioned earlier, some of the interviews we had, Mr. Laka. How do we maintain that quality throughout in our local music?
It's very important, because I know back in the 80s and the early 90s, the question of quality actually shielded us from being recognized, because everyone was complaining about quality. South Africa invested in some of the best equipment you can find anywhere in the world. We remedied that situation. But the problem now, we have computers, people sitting in one room and starting to... And I've always, I'm saying to them, this is a message I'm taking out there. Anyone who thinks he can just sit in a small room and record bad sounding quality and try to send it to SABC, it will be rejected, and they mustn't come back to me and say, please help us get our music on radio. It shouldn't be like that. It should take center stage, and it should be the priority of any material that is coming to SABC.
Now, how do you ensure then, Mr. Sibiya, that the royalties being paid to these composers and to the artists are going to the right people all the time, to the right artists and to the right composers?
In Samro, we have a department called the Rights Holder Services. They make sure that they follow, members. You always have to check every year. Numbers change, and new people are born and others pass on, and also people move, which is what happens? You live here today, then you're in Cape Town next time.
Yes.
So post boxes change. So we make sure that we follow that quite rigidly to make sure that our information is up to date. In fact, every time before we pay a royalty, our team scours around to make sure that this money, before you press the button, is going to the right person.
Yes.
So we definitely try and make sure. But let me encourage artists as well to, if you know that your particulars have changed, come back to Samro. If you have new music, come back to Samro and notify us. If you're doing concerts, notify us so that you can get paid. That's important.
Now, Mr. Laka, 90% you received from your 60% originally. But do you think there's other challenges that musicians and artists and composers in this country face that we are not aware of?
Well, there's always, challenges in the music industry. But you see, my thinking was, let's get a play. That's where it all starts. It starts with your music at home. You bring it on there and you get publicity. And that's where, the challenges follow, because once one starts making money and, the behavior changes and so many things that he has spoken about, that, if one can be able to keep his money to third generation of the family, then you have been successful. Yes. But because this is new in this country, from starting this December, we'll see a lot of South African artists making a lot of money because of the concerts, the exposure. The behavior will change. It might take about 2 to 3 years before we acclimatize to this, because it has never happened anywhere. So I think we'll meet those challenges when we get there, but we'll try to get measures in place so that we shouldn't fall in traps that we can later on not be able to reverse back.
Gentlemen, I must thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining me here in studio.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Now that was legendary musician Don Laka in studio, as well as Mr. Abe Sabia, Reverend Abe Sabia. He's the acting CEO for Samro, joining me in studio. Now, we continue this discussion a little bit later, but right now, on the Fort Hare story, remember the Fort Hare centenary celebrations? It's happening right now. Let's cross to Unati Bingose. Unati, a very good morning to you. Can you tell us what is going on there?
Thank you very much, and a warm welcome to all our SABC News viewers. Indeed, we are coming to you live from Fort Hare University's main campus in Alice. It is a special broadcast, a very, very special one indeed, because we are celebrating the 100 years of Fort Hare's academic excellence. I mean, we are broadcasting right in front of the main entrance of where the celebrations are set to take place. As you possibly can see behind me, it is a hive of activities. It's mainly former students of this university who are glad in their gold-striped black blazers of this institution, but glaringly and very, very disturbingly is the absence of the current crop of learners. I mean, those who are very, very critical in the existence of this institution. Of course, we understand that there is a court interdict against them following the violence that we saw, particularly on Wednesday night, where they went on a rampage, looting some of the institution's stores, and of course breaking windows and doing a lot of damage. And of course, we understand that the Alice Court, Magistrates Court here, those that were arrested, the 14 that were arrested, were remanded in custody. So there is a kind of a boycott, particularly among the students. They are ensuring that they won't be part of these celebrations, saying that there's nothing for them to celebrate if they do not have the financial aid that they need, particularly the issue around food. They say that they are not supported when it comes to issues of accommodation and, of course, issues of food. But down on the ground, I can tell you that the police are maintaining a very, very high presence. They are on their horsebacks, some are on their feet, ensuring that everything goes smoothly. We understand that the guests that are expected to attend this event, some of them have already arrived. I mean, we saw a couple of ministers, including Minister in the Presidency, Jeff Radebe, and of course the main dignitary, the head of state, President Jacob Zuma, and of course his Zimbabwean counterpart, also expected to be here in no time. But what I can tell you is that the momentum towards the main celebrations is gaining steam, and things are expected to get underground at around 11 o'clock, and the main celebrations will take place news in about an hour's time. With that, it's a wrap from myself, Unati Pinwase, and cameraman Sihlem Kize. It's back to you guys in Auckland Park.
News Today provide news updates giving a wealth of knowledge. Breaking stories and crossing live for you. We follow business developments intensely. Experts and analysts tackle all challenging issues for you. We cover stories locally and abroad to keep you informed. We cover all sporting codes just for you. We are sure to give you weather to be ready for the day. Stay tuned to News Today at 3 p.m. from Monday to Friday on SABC News.
There are no permanent enemies or friends in politics.
I agree with Professor Siepe fully.
Do people still preserve the meaning?
They have no clue what it meant to be black under apartheid.
Acting Police Commissioner Phahlane dropped a bombshell in Parliament this week when he suggested there could be a possible cover-up. What do you think of this story? What kind of problems were those, Vuyo, if I can just get in there quickly?
Every corner or sphere of our lives has become a site of struggle.
Watch Media Monitor with me, Alicia Jali, Sundays at 9 a.m. only on the SABC News channel.
News Today keeps you informed with news locally and around the world.
When Judge John Hlophe challenged the Supreme Court of Appeal when it sent the matter back and said that there must be an inquiry set up.
We unpack business news.
There's an increase in general inflation in the country.
We give you up-to-date news of the day.
The drugs were seized at several locations in Sydney, including a shipping container sent from Hong Kong. Police say it's the largest haul of illicit drugs in 2 years.
We round up sports news.
Kotata, tell me about the legacy that you would like to build and be remembered for.
Trying to get my foundation running, which is going to focus on, all the sport, doesn't matter disability or able body. So, I'm passionate about sports.
Stay informed every Monday to Friday from 3 to 5:30 p.m. CAT. SABC News.
welcome back. Special ceremonial session is underway at the Constitutional Court for the Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke, who is retiring from the bench at the end of the month. Moseneke joined the highest court in 2002, and 3 years later, he was appointed the Deputy Chief Justice. Today marks his last day in office. The 68-year-old Moseneke served 15 years on the bench. Justice Moseneke studied law while serving a prison sentence on Robben Island for treason. He was sent to jail at just 15 years old.
On the other hand, Helen Keller reminds us that education should train the child to use.
We've lost that link. We wanted to go live to the Constitutional Court where Deputy Chief Justice is currently speaking, in fact, to say farewell to all of us in South Africa. But as soon as we establish that link, we'll go there live. But let's now take it from the top. It is Newsroom. This is Friday, the 20th of May, 2016. Newsroom on SABC News, Channel 404. If you've just joined us, Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome. We're broadcasting live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg to the rest of the African continent. I'm Elvis Preston, and I'll be with you until 12 o'clock. Renee will be joining us with the news shortly, and we're also streaming live on YouTube with the entire show available on our YouTube channel. Today, we focus on the announcement by the SABC that it will play from now on 90% of local music on its 18 radio stations to ensure that local content are prioritized to reflect the diversity of all South Africa's cultures. So in the question of the day, we're asking you, more than a week of listening to local music on SABC radio stations, are you thrilled? Are you happy, joyful, blessed, pleased, and ecstatic about it? Let me know. Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom as well as on the Facebook page. But it seems like we have that link up and running to the Constitutional Court where we say goodbye to Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke.
All of these problems, and it's just one. It's education. The Holy Bible warns in Hosea 4 verse 6. The Chief Justice knew it all by heart. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Buddha, on the other hand, recognizes that you have much learning to be skillful in handicraft, well trained in discipline, and to be of good speech. This is the great blessing. And finally, the Holy Quran also teaches us in Surah Al-Zumar 39:9. Are those equal? Those who know, or those who do not know? It is those who are endowed with education, understanding, that receive admonition. Now, despite this obvious ancient virtues, access to teaching and learning has not been freely and widely accessible to all people at all of human are present in varying degrees on a denial of access to education and training. That even power relations that mark slavery, colonialism, industrial age, and the information economy are girded in great part by inadequate access to quality teaching and learning. At the end of the long and glorious struggle against all forms of oppression at the beginning of our democratic and inclusive society, we, filled with a rightful optimism, guaranteed universal access to basic education. We collectively said, everyone has the right to basic education, including adult education. Even so, disputes and access to basic education in our society are not scarce. There are continuing contests on the governance of public schools and policies on admission of learners. This despite a number of precedents of our courts that were meant to clear the murky waters of the shared space between school governing bodies and provincial executives charged with the regulation of public schools. Here, in this case, this contestation plays itself out in the validity of amendment of regulations of admission of learners to public schools in Gauteng. On the 18th of July 2011, a member of Executive Council for Education, Gauteng, the MEC, published draft amendments to the regulations and invited comments from the public. The Federation of Governing Bodies of South African Schools, FEDSAS, submitted that a number of regulations be withdrawn as they were ultra-virus. The MEC's powers flouted the principle of legality or caused a conflict between national and provincial legislation. The amendments were promulgated on the 9th of May 2012. The High Court, FEDSAS challenged the validity of the amended regulations, and after considering each of the impugned regulations individually, the court held that several of the regulations were indeed inconsistent with the Constitution. The High Court said only one of these regulations, in Regulation 5.5, the MEC and the head of the Department of Education in Gauteng were unhappy. They petitioned the Supreme Court of Appeal. The court upheld the appeal, save Regulation 2.2a, which was struck down. In this court, FEDSAS submitted that some of the impugned regulations were neither reasonable nor justifiable in terms of Section 4 of the Gauteng School Education Act, 1995. It further contended that there was a conflict between some of the regulations, which is provincial legislation, the South African Schools Act, which is national legislation. FEDSAS argued that this conflict rendered the regulations inoperative by virtue of Section 149 of the Constitution. It submitted that the MEC's reasons for introducing the impugned regulations were without a proper factual basis. The MEC and the HOD contended that the public schools cannot be governed in a manner that only catered for the interest of its incumbent parents and learners. They submitted that the regulations were rational and reasonable. They argued for the validity of the impugned regulations in the light of their purposes. Equal Education was admitted as a friend of the court. Its main submissions highlighted the inextricable link between geography and race in our land, and drew the court's attention to the inadequacy of proximity as a sole criterion in the determination of feeder zones in the interim in nature had the effect of unfairly discriminating between entry-level learners, in effect based on race. In a unanimous judgment written by me, and therefore in which Mogoeng CJ, Sierra AJ, Cameron J, Jafta J, Foneman J, Khanbepe J, Madanga J, Tantra J, Nkabila J, and Zonda J concurred. We hold that there is no conflict between provincial and national legislation. This is because education is a functional area of concurrent national and provincial legislative competence. The Constitution anticipates the possibility of overlap and conflict between these legislative competences. We hold that the regulations can be read in harmony with the national legislation, and that none of the impugned regulations are unreasonable, unjustifiable, or irrational. a little detail. Regulation 3.7 disallows a learner's prospective school from requesting confidential information from her current school before the admission of the learner into the new school. Its legitimate trust is properly aligned to the objectives of preventing unfair exclusion of a learner at the point of admission to a school. For this reason, we hold that the regulation is rational. Regulation 4.1 and 4.2 empowers the MEC to determine feeder zones. We find that the default feeder zones regime provided for in Regulation 4.2 was intended to be transitional. This is because these feeder zones are set unilaterally and might deny relevant stakeholders meaningful participation in a matter that affects a school materially. Regulation 5, read with Regulation 8, empowers the district director to place an unplaced learner at a school that has not been declared full by an HOD. This court holds that the regulations are rational, are reasonable and justified, and are not at odds with Section 5.5 of the Schools Act. The HOD's power to determine learner enrollment capacity and to declare whether a school is full or not assists the MSC to ensure that there are enough school places for every child, and every such child is placed in a school to learn. Regulation 11.5 empowers the district director to consider the relative capacity of other schools in a district as a criterion for placing a learner in a particular school. We hold this regulation to be reasonable, rational, and justifiable, as its guiding purpose is to ensure that every learner is placed in a school, a duty imposed by our Constitution. Regulation 16 allows a parent to lodge an objection with the HOD before appealing to the MEC. This court holds that the regulation does not add an extra layer to the appeal process and that it does not, in fact, amount to delegation of powers. For all these reasons, we unanimously make the following order. 1. Leave to appeal is granted, save in respect of the abandoned costs order of the Supreme Court of Appeal. 2. The appeal against the order of the Supreme Court of Appeal is dismissed, subject to paragraph 3. 3. The first respondent, member of the Executive Council for Education, Gauteng,
Well, we do apologize for those technical glitches there, but as you can see, we were live in the Constitutional Court today, where a special ceremonial session will be taking place there today for Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke. The Deputy Chief Justice will be retiring from its bench at the end of the month. Moseneke joined the highest court in 2002 and 3 years later was appointed the Deputy Chief Justice. At the age of 15, Moseneke became the country's youngest political prisoner, serving 10 years on Robben Island, where he managed to pass his matric examinations before enrolling and graduating with BA and B Juris degrees while in prison. He later completed his LLB, also with UNISA. Judge Moseneke spoke passionately about the importance of good education, serving to society and family values and support in particular during his acceptance speech 4 years ago. Now moving on to more local news, President Zuma has wrapped up his 4th visit to a Gulf region state this year. His visit to Qatar was aimed at taking advantage of the growing interest by the oil-rich Gulf states to invest in new markets.
Another state visit to the Middle East, this time around in Qatar. Not only does this small nation possess the 3rd largest gas reserves, it's also becoming an important global player. Starved of fertile land and dwindling oil prices, it's looking at new markets. Perhaps finding a willing partner in South Africa. Already more than 6,000 South Africans work in Qatar, from petrochemicals to health, mining and hospitality. But these countries say a lot more can still be explored.
South Africa is a suitable base for Qataris to launch their economic activities in Southern Africa and the African continent. The recent opening of the Doha Bank representative office in Johannesburg as an important first step for Qatari investment in project financing in Southern Africa as well as the African continent.
Agreements in areas of arts and culture, defense and police, some of those signed. They've also put in place a specialized committee to ensure implementation of agreements. The decreasing demand on oil is forcing countries like Qatar to seek new markets. Africa, with a population of more than 1 billion people, is a potential market. And South Africa prides itself as a gateway to the continent because of its established infrastructure. Mzwande Lembech, SABC News, Doha, Qatar.
Let's go back to the Concourt where a very important event is taking place today.
We treasure your presence. The Deputy Minister, on behalf of the Executive, Deputy Minister Jeffrey, thank you ever so much. I thank you even for things I can't articulate publicly, but which I mentioned to you yesterday. The President of the Supreme Court of Appeal, Justice Laxmi Party, the Deputy President of the Supreme Court of Appeal, Mandisa Maya, Transformation Agent, the Justices of the Constitutional Court, 7 retired, the Justices of the Supreme Court of Appeal, Judges President and Judges Present, distinguished South Africans, good morning. It's very difficult to know what to say about a man as distinguished as the Deputy Chief Justice. I think in a gathering of this nature, it should be more about what is it that his life communicates or has communicated over the years to us. What message is to be drawn, what lessons are to be drawn from a life so well lived, from this kind of a role model. And let me touch on this because he was able to touch on it last week. One of the profound lessons to draw from his life, from his endurance, is this. He's living, and every normal human being who is a justice of the Constitutional Court would want to step into his shoes. and become the next Deputy Chief Justice. But what if it doesn't become you? Must the institution, the Constitutional Court as an institution, or the judiciary as an institution be destabilized because you did not get what you believe you and you alone ought to get? Don't betray the lesson that this great leader has blessed us with. He didn't throw tantrums when he was unquestionably, eminently qualified to take over as Chief Justice of the Republic. He knew that he was deserving, he knew that he was qualified, he knew that all things being equal, Chief Justice, it was proper, it was appropriate to hope, to believe that you would naturally become the Chief Justice. But I love what he said, is that, you know, it's an honor just to be a judge, even a judge of the High Court. It's more of an honor to be a justice of the highest court in the land. And it's even more so to be the Deputy Chief Justice of the Republic. And also, there is a presidential prerogative as to who becomes either Deputy Chief Justice or Chief Justice. My responsibility is more to the nation than to myself. That's a lesson to draw from the experience, and I dare say, the unimaginably painful experience that the Deputy Chief Justice of the Republic has had to go through, has had to endure. So, my colleagues, it's normal to aspire. It is permissible to aspire, but don't betray the legacy of this great time. Let there be no tensions in this court and the broader judiciary just because it didn't become you. Like him, embrace the new leader, whoever she or he will be, and let the business of the nation be carried forward so that the judiciary can continue to be that arm of the state. The broader public has confidence in to do what needs to be done at any given time, whether it's preferred by the majority or the minority. Just remain loyal to its affirmation or oath of office. South Africa has many challenges, does it not? But the hard work behind the scenes of leaders like the Deputy Chief Justice of this country, the hard work by some of the leaders here present, President Mbeki, President Moseneke, has helped us appreciate when it looked absolutely impossible the depth of the capacities and the collective wisdom, the unimaginable resolve of South Africans that had never been tapped into before the early 1990s. All these problems that we have, and there are many, can be solved. If in the midst of intense hatred, and I say hatred advisedly, and tensions between black and white South Africans, exacerbated by the death of Chris Hani just at the wrong time, could not derail the mission to accomplish freedom in this country, that there is no problem beyond South Africans when they commit to finding a solution to it. The truth of the matter is, when Chris Hani died, I believe almost all South Africans were sure that the negotiations were doomed. But here we are. We have a black Chief Justice, a black Deputy Chief Justice. Look at how many black judges are here. The fruit of the determination by white and black South Africans to do what is in the best interest of their country. So, very much in line with the preamble to our Constitution, let's join our hands together. If only to remember the sacrifice of this man at the tender age of 14. I think that's history. Your championship in that regard remains unsurpassed. Unlike many of us, he doesn't know what it means to play marbles and to play soccer with no real goalpost, I suspect. If he does know a bit about it, he has seen others participate in it. Just so that South Africa doesn't fail, it becomes a shining example not only to the continent but to the global village. It would be a betrayal of that sacrifice and the suffering that Mekanabo Moseneke and the entire family had to endure as a result, just so that we make the most of the possibilities that are all over us as South Africans. So, leaving this room, let's go out there and make our own contributions based on what he has already done in mending race relations and address the racial tensions in this country very calmly, maturely, and with the wisdom that we have. It's never going to help to go blow by blow. It requires a sober reflection in line with the preamble to our Constitution that says the divisions of the past, which were founded on racial discrimination, must be healed. That's what this man has been fighting for all his life up until now. That is why Edwin Cameron is the one who paid tribute to him. Not because he was trying to be progressive, but because he is. We must speak out as South Africans against destruction. I mean, our schools get burned, national assets get burned, but you hardly ever see South Africans get angry that their national assets are being destroyed. I mean, in memory of this man, we owe it to ourselves, we owe it to posterity, that our voices begin to be heard and say, enough is enough. Let's not just report the damage without collectively and loudly condemning this wrongdoing. Let us never appear to be sympathetic or understanding to destruction. He could have been bitter when he came out of Robben Island. He wasn't. He could have refused even to go anywhere near the Pretoria bar. They even did not want to admit him. But because he was not bitter, it is to the Pretoria bar that he turned to sharpen his forensic skills. As judges, we are enjoined by the Constitution and our oath of office to be independent. we should never seek to be affirmed by anybody. And I must make this point. I know that some people get angry when I cast it as broadly as I'm going to. It is not just independence from the executive or parliament. No, it is independence from even opposition parties. It is independence from big business. It is independence from the media and all the many aspirant kingmakers out there who seem to think that without their support you can't make it in life. He has defied the odds. We have the only way in which we can give practical expression to our constitutional mandate as the judiciary is not to pretend to be true to our oath of office, but to be true indeed. A judge should never find himself or herself in a position where some people are always guaranteed success before the case is even heard. It should never be that way. That is the worst form of corruption in a constitutional democracy. It is that time in the history of South Africa where we've got to pick up something from some American people. I think it was actually a borrowed expression that J.F. Kennedy used, borrowed from, I think it was George Washington, if not Churchill. Ask not what your country can do for you, but rather what you can do for your country. That is the spirit. At the time of his disappointment, he had asked himself, what is it that I can do for my people, for my country? Let us be selfless. Let us be content with the little that we have. And remember always that there are multitudes out there who go to bed on an empty stomach. Let's internalize these wisdom-laden words and give practical expression to them. I think I've spoken for rather too long. Let me call the next one. I call upon Advocate Mr. Zabeza, SC, to speak on behalf of Advocates for Transformation. We call him Brady. Even if I'm wearing a gown, I'll call him Brady because it's not a formal session. Brady, please, time.
Hey, Chief Justice has been taking so much time.
Those are the benefits of being Chief Justice.
This is an occasion like no other, and I've been in a few occasions of this nature in this court. I've never been in a similar occasion where people were allowed to clap. It just makes this one occasion the unique occasion that it is. Chief Justice, you have assisted me in identifying the luminaries today, from Presidents and Bailey and Moseneke to the heads of courts, and indeed to the honorable justices of this court, past and present, and to the leaders of the other courts and members of those courts. So I will not go step by step in recognizing those. They are recognized. I will, however, recognize our most esteemed honored guest, his dear wife, his family, his extended family, who may be here. Honorable South Africans, comrades and friends, I'm very privileged to speak on an occasion marking the retirement from this bench of South Africa, Comrade Ernest de Haag Moseneke. I cherish the privilege more when I look back at what I believe everyone will agree has been a life lived in full. A checkered history of struggle, trials and tribulations, cross-cutting a number of occupations in his career. A life which we will never be able to speak sufficiently well of on any respect thereof, let alone in 10 minutes. It is a multifaceted life history, from a political rebel to a professional lawyer, from a political jailbird to a prominent judge of this court. And today we have come to know of his keen interest in Christianity and Islam. It is hard to imagine how all of these terms can be used to describe, in a broad brush against canvas fashion, the career of one individual, except when that individual is Ernest de Haag Moseneke. Chief Justice, your deputy has had battles with apartheid, and we cannot cover all of them. He had battles with apartheid South Africa even after his release from Robben Island. From the time that the law societies objected to his application to be admitted as an attorney on the basis that he was not a citizen of South Africa, but a citizen of an independent state called Moseneke. He had trials and tribulations when his application to become an advocate of the Pretoria Bar raised controversy within the Pretoria Bar, because of that, up to that point, that bar had been an exclusively white bar, or had an exclusively white membership. We will remember, Chief Justice, the delicate balance that your deputy struck in articulating here and abroad the radical stance of the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania's slogans on a number of occasions, and balancing that with his practice as an advocate of the High Court of South Africa. There was one slogan which he had to contend with here and abroad: one settler, one bullet. It was always going to be problematic, and it was. I am sure all of us immediately recall how on national television Comrade Moseneke was put under the spotlight by Mr. Adrien Steed, an ANC anchor, about exactly that slogan. Time and space do not permit me to give a blow-by-blow account of that interview, except to say that he gave as much as he got, and judging by a nationwide reaction from most black people, he won the debate hands down. His political engagements, especially as the deputy president of the PAC, were held by many to be the reason that his chambers became the object of a bombing attack that might easily have been aimed at him. We are happy that he survived. So many people, Chief Justice, will be more qualified than I am to talk about his milestone as an intellectual thought leader in the development of our constitutional jurisprudence. Their judgment, I am sure, that he must look back at with a level of satisfaction, because they shaped our jurisprudence and contributed to accolades from juriscommentators and specialists like Professor DeForce, who spoke glowingly of him about his commitment to fairness and justice. A number of journalists, notably one Niren Tosi, have ascribed him as the most independent-minded and imaginative jurist. This was one of the accolades that came his way when he penned the majority judgment with Cameron J. in Lancaster, where they found that the legislation did not sufficiently insulate the members of the police from political interference. There are some judgments which the Deputy Chief Justice will look back on and must wonder if he would have written in the same way where he confronted with those issues today. You will know that the Moseneke versus the President of the Republic, who is here today, which effectively held that the National Intelligence Agency head, Billy Moseneke, was not entitled to procedural fairness when he was dismissed by President Mbeki, is one such judgment. You are also known to have penned a piece in which you highlighted the enormous power that the Constitution has given to the President of the Republic. Cynics have reacted to that piece by saying, you should have been aware of this when you were one of the drafters of the Constitution. Those who are kind to you say, cynically too, I believe, that you did not lament the enormous powers that the Constitution gave to the President of the Republic, because you thought that all the presidents would be like Mandela. What it is that inspired that is the time will tell. There are, however, two judgments on affirmative action that have become the leading cases in that area. And those are the Minister of Finance versus Van Heerden and SABC versus Solidarity on behalf of Barnard. I am precluded from making further comments on affirmative action because of a judgment on the subject in which the same subject was under consideration in this court, the case of Solidarity versus the Department of Correctional Services is still outstanding. Having been a member of the legal teams involved in that case, I will wait to see your contribution to the affirmative action jurisprudence traversed in that case with bated breath. As you retire and as you write your memoirs, you are going to be challenged, now in retirement more than in your time on the bench, to make unequivocal pronouncements on the question of expropriation as a tool for redress in land reform. There are angry voices out there that I'm aware have been calling for more radical judgments on land restitutions. They have been following your speeches in and out of court. Quite apart from the EFF, I'll mention that one of them is a former member of the EFF, one Andile Mutam, now of a movement called Blackfest, Landfest. On your retirement, I invite you to read his critique of one of your extraterritorial speeches on the subject of expropriation in what he calls black opinion. He asks inter alia the question, before we begin to talk of compensation, never mind the question of whether compensation should be just and equitable, the first question to ask is, whose land are we talking about? you imagine that Mitama postulated this question because he knows that you, as a political animal who suffered for the Pan-Africanist Congress of Tanzania and who has recently described Jafta Masimula, the tiger of Tanzania, grew up in an organization where the rallying cry, amongst others, was Israel. And that remains your unfinished business. And in that unfinished business, you will encounter a lot of vibrant and robust debate. Lest we forget, Chief Justice.
Thank you, Chief Justice. Like Ragini has indicated, protocol has been observed. I'm deeply humbled and honored to stand here today and bid farewell to this giant. I lack appropriate words to start to describe the role the Deputy Chief Justice has played in transformation of our country. Deputy Chief Justice, since you were born, it was written all over you that you are destined to dispense justice. In search of justice, freedom and equality, at the tender age of 40, you joined active politics when it was not fashionable to do so. It was an offense which could attract capital punishment. Nonetheless, Chief Justice, nothing stopped you from doing what you believed was right. For your quest of justice, at the age of 15, you were sentenced for an effective term of 10 years imprisonment. That did not overwhelm you. To you, rather, it was another opportunity to prepare yourself for the future through education. You attended your university through correspondence in order to achieve what you have become today. You are a freedom fighter. As a practitioner, in opposing oppression of the time you assisted in the formation of the Black Lives Association, you opposed the undemocratic nature of the law societies. Your efforts helped in the formation of the Law Society of South Africa. Compromised as it is, Black practitioners found voice in it as opposed to its forerunner, the Association of Lawyers of Law Societies. You played your part in the transformation of the legal profession. Bradley has indicated the fights you waged against the Law Society for admission and also against the bar to be admitted in that exclusively white bar. Chief Justice, we are gathered here today to celebrate the life and achievement of this great son of the soil, the humble servant of the people of South Africa. DCJ is a judge whose judgments have always been hardly taught. His judgments are not influenced by emotions, prejudice, or stereotypes. In his judgments, there is no favoritism or fear. Chief Justice, the departure of Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke will leave a void in your court, which will never be easy to fill. I hope the President will find someone to replace him and fit square in his shoes. But there is nothing that we can do about it. This was bound to happen because he has to retire. What is, however, pleasing, DCJ, is that you are not leaving us forever. You will always be available when South Africa needs you. BLA will, of course, have time to come and tap knowledge and wisdom from you. Today, you are only retiring from active service as a judge. DCJ, the country looks at you as one of the strongest judges in the country, a towering legal mind, and for your commitment to fairness and justice. All your judgments are to me a must read. I will not pinpoint one. Bradley has done that, and eloquently so. With your sharp mind, please engage in the national discourse and make your voice be heard. You will be most suited to tell judges that a racist judge has no room in the South African judiciary. We know we shall hear your voice and your truly reasoned advice to those who, out of frustrations, ban national infrastructure like schools and libraries. You will tell them that you did your schooling through correspondence when it was not easy when you were in prison. And you will tell them to cherish what they have. You have played your part. You deserve a tranquil retirement. Like Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe once said, "Here is a tree rooted in African soil, nourished with waters from the rivers of Africa. Come and sit under its shade and become with us the leaves of the same branch and the branches of the same tree. Find a good African tree and take a good rest. We love your writings. Put pen to paper, we shall read." Thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sigoma. On behalf of the National Association of Democratic Lawyers, NADEL, and the Law Society of South Africa, I call Mr. Moseneke.
Thank you, Chief Justice. As previously indicated, I will soon say all protocol observed. It is a singular honor and privilege for me to stand here and share with you the experiences of both NADEL and the Law Society of South Africa with the Honorable Deputy Chief Justice. As my colleagues in the two organizations were reflecting on separate occasions on their experiences with the Honorable Deputy Chief Justice, I was reminded of my own personal experience and interaction with the Deputy Chief Justice. These experiences and encounters are best described by an Eastern Cape old man who talked to his children about the sunrise and changing weather. This old man, expressing himself in Xhosa, described the situation as follows. Kha, uvakala izithonga zendudumo, umenyeze imibane kwangentathakusa, suke sefuku isithotho kusabukelwe ngamayeyeye, kugxothwa isithotho sifudiselwa embo, kuba khona kusithiwa kudliwa ngendebe endala. Cimana unomathotholo nezihlobisi hleze zinibize imibala. Suke kwekwambu ubumnyama asazi nalapho singatshona khona. Inkwenkwezi eyodwa ekhanyise ngathi lilanga, ixela leyo iphuma empuma, ikhombisa izazi apho usana khona. So Deputy Chief Justice, early in your childhood upbringing, life presented you with an option to choose between action or inaction. In either choice, there was no easy walk, for the consequences were most severe. In the midst of this call, guided by your conscience, you decided to walk along the road of heroes and heroines. In the words of former President Thabo Mbeki, I quote this. You have borne the pain of those who have known fear and learned to conquer it. We have marched in front when comfort was in the midst of the ranks. We have laughed to condemn against a river of tears. Perhaps, amid temptations, you You refused to succumb to the worshipping of the beast, for you knew that whoever worships the beast and its image and receive the mark on their forehead or on their hand will themselves drink the wine of his fury, which he has poured at full strength into the cup of his anger. At the tender age of 14, you must have been a courageous man to choose the side of the oppressed and champion their cause. It must have taken a special wisdom at one's risk, since the wrath of the oppressors were subject to no restraint awaited. The pain and suffering of your people, coupled with the vision of a free society in which all would enjoy the universal freedoms, compel you to reject and abandon the life which the majority of your age group elected to live. Prospects of solitary confinement, long imprisonment, torture, and long separations from your parents became a path to endure for a cause of the majority and the future of your people. A selfless sacrifice such as this formed the basis of the struggle of our freedom. The sacrifice you made at a time when few could do did not make you more important than the others. Equally, it did not translate to you being more intelligent and superior to the masses of our people. Indeed, yours was to be a participant in a process that will culminate in a caring society where all live in equality and have access to justice for all. These sacrifices were made by you regardless of impending deaths, including that of family members. Instead, all these sacrifices were made with no prospects of imminent and prospective personal gain. No price tag was set for the sacrifice you elected to make, but the much awaited reward in your mind was the freedom and prosperity of your people in society where they would live as equal people enjoying their freedom, which include equality and equality of opportunities. For these prospects, you resolve to join your suffering people in the destruction of apartheid and its system. Indeed, you are a courageous man. You crown it all by participating in the drafting of a document that envisages the new South Africa, which you initially imagined as a young person. Our constitution set in motion South Africa in which all enjoy freedom and equality, subjecting those in power to act with accountability in a more transparent and checked manner. Your response to the call by masses to assume the responsibility of the bench was an attestation to the commitment you made for the freedom of your people. As I understand it, your personal importance or position were never a consideration. Guided by your conscience, you easily agreed to leave your lucrative practice and other responsibilities which brought personal wealth and riches. Your commitment to our people and the life of South Africa, as promised in the Constitution, is fortified in your numerous written judgment. Brady has already referred to the case of Glenster versus the President of the Republic of South Africa. Most importantly, I will refer to the case of Walindile Community versus King Sabata Talengia Municipality, where you stated the following: I must, however, dispel the suggestion that a right to claim restoration of rights in land under the Restitution Act is not an existing right. One such right would certainly be the right warranted by the Constitution to lodge a claim for restoration of the land in question. This case is very important in view of the outcry by many of our people for the return of their land and proper distribution under the constitutional democracy. This case took into account the undisputed evidence of the fact that communities had lived on the land in question for nearly 2 centuries, something borne out by the ancestral graves located in the vicinity of the land claim, which ancestral graveyard the municipality had in its ordinary meeting acknowledged. Deputy Chief Justice, you leave us here not because you have to stop. You leave us here because you have to start again. The Law Society of South Africa asked a rhetorical question. Why must it be now? Our country calls for a leadership that is not corruptible. Our country needs a judiciary that is independent to safeguard our constitutional democracy. Our country needs direction in the midst of confusion and threatening chaos. However, Nadel insists that the new station will be its offices. And you will start where you left off. Our people still cry for freedom and equality. The majority of our people are yet to taste the much promised freedom in our constitution. The culture of human rights is yet to be realized and enjoyed. Your coming back to Nadel is more welcome and highly appreciated. There is no retirement, but rather the beginning of all beginnings. You must start again. Keep on keeping on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Notice. He's a commissioner of the JSC. Next is Mr. Jeremy Muller, SC, on behalf of the General Council of the Bar.
Thank you, Chief Justice, other justices, retired judges, honoured guests, and Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke. Reactions to the retirement of prominent individuals come in a variety of forms. Many retirements are greeted with universal relief, some with indifference, a few with mixed emotions, and a very few with reluctance to acknowledge that the end of an era has arrived, and with sadness even. And today we mark the retirement from this court of your tenure, and I know of someone whose absence will universally evoke the last mentioned feelings. At least they will from lawyers across the country. From some sectors of our body politic, perhaps not quite so much. Deputy Chief Justice, like many who have transcended excellence and intruded into greatness, your career has chalked up what appear to be several lines already. Aspects have been touched on already, and if one just simply runs through a few of the chief milestones, you've used your 10 years of incarceration on Robben Island to acquire 3 law degrees from your alma mater, the University of South Africa. You then joined the firm of attorneys in Pretoria, practiced briefly as an attorney before you were called to the bar in 1983. That had the effect of abolishing the whites-only rule at the Pretoria bar. 10 years later, you were part of the committee which drew up the interim constitution. In 1994, as deputy chair of the Independent Electoral Commission, you helped supervise the first of our democratic elections. In 1995, after 12 distinguished years at the bar, you entered the corporate world and for the next 6 years rubbed shoulders with what my daughter sometimes refers to as the suits. Before you returned to your first love, the law, in 2001. And after a brief tenure as a High Court judge, you became a justice of this court. And in 2005, Deputy Chief Justice. You graced that position on this court for more than 10 years. Your contribution to the work of the court has been immense, but it's invidious to try and single out particular judgments on an occasion like this. What is evident, however, is something that RRD touched on, and that is your particular interest in land issues and land rights. In a recent paper, you referred with approval to the following observations of Frans Fanon in his work entitled, in the English translation at least, The Wretched of the Earth. This was the quotation that caught my eye. For a colonized people, the most essential value, because it is the most concrete, is first and foremost the land. The land will bring them bread and, above all, dignity. Fanon was a Frenchman. And like some of those in our country who, effectively wearing of jaunty French berets, Justice Moseneke's view, at least for the time being, subject to what lessons you've taught him this morning, is that the glacial pace of our land reform program is not the fault of the Constitution. The fault lies elsewhere, bureaucratic sclerosis and other impediments. And you've pointed out that the property clause in our Constitution does not contain that notorious phrase of which we read so much, namely, willing buyer, willing seller. And that the market value provisions in the Constitution list market value as only one of the criteria which the court must take into account when setting fair compensation for land expropriated. You've authored a number of important judgments in the field of expropriation and constitutional right to property, including the Iran Property Development versus City Cape Town decision, Shoprite Checkers versus MEC for Economic Development in the Eastern Cape. And these and the other cases give concrete expression to your view that social justice and cohesion will remain unrealized ideals for as long as urban and rural land injustice dominates the lives of the majority of our citizens. Despite your stellar career, Justice, Deputy Justice, you have experienced one, perhaps two, disappointments. Those setbacks were referred to by the Chief Justice. They may have called to mind the wry observation by Oscar Wilde, who said that to lose one parent may be regarded as misfortune. To lose both looks like carelessness. If it was due to carelessness that you suffered those disappointments, it was carelessness of an admirable kind, and in all likelihood your determination to speak publicly about the things that animate you. Not too long ago you delivered a paper at a conference. You started by publicly reminding yourself that although a product of our revolution for a just society, you were a sitting judge and that you were accordingly going to speak like a judge, or as you put it, you were going to stick to your knitting. Reading the speech recently, I regret to say that I don't know that you did stick to your knitting, at least not entirely. And the paper, may I say so, was all the better for it. An inclination to outspokenness outside the calm confines of this court has doubtless provoked the ire of prominent persons. Who knows, perhaps it may even have contributed to one or two of your disappointments. But it has made a significant contribution to the public discourse on the role of judges and the primacy of the law, and in particular the primacy of the Constitution, in a way which the judgment may not always be able to do. Mind you, those who have shown a sensitivity to some of your remarks extracurrially may be grateful for the fact that they are not counsel appearing before you on those rare occasions when you felt it necessary to say something about a submission which you considered inappropriate or absurd. Many would have witnessed your polite but pointed reprimand of counsel for Parliament during argument in the Public Protector case recently, when her manner exceeded the bounds of acceptable enthusiasm for the point. Less than a week ago, if press reports are to be believed, one of our leading silks, who is here today, was somewhat brought to heel. According to those reports, Justice Moseneke posed to him the same rhetorical question in the IDC case as the well-known tennis prodigy of a few years ago, John McEnroe, used to pose to startled chair umpires something like, "You can't be serious." And again, if press reports are to be believed, counsel for the IEC gave the question serious consideration for a millisecond before indicating that, on reflection, he had no further submissions. Perhaps your occasionally stern demeanour is something learned from the days when you served on the disciplinary committee of the Makana Football Association, which I understand was the prisoners' self-governing football body in Northern Ireland. There is, of course, the other side to you, and the side which so struck a young female advocate at the Cape Bar, at the Pretoria Bar, that she wrote about it in an article some 10 years ago. Mark your elevation as Deputy Chief Justice. And for her great admiration for you, we'd started together at the Pretoria Bar, and she wrote of that shared experience. One black man at the Pretoria Bar, the first, and she, a female, neither entirely welcome at the bar at the time. And of the camaraderie of those times, she wrote, "The greatest dreamers of all was Advocate Moseneke. And today, as Deputy Chief Justice of the Constitutional Court, Justice Moseneke has lost none of his youthful energy and enthusiasm. His effortless and meteoric rise to fame has left him as humble and unassuming as when I first met him." Later in the article, she described you as a genial friend of life's banquet, and finally called in aid that old Yiddish expression describing you as a mensch. And if you recall the article, Deputy Chief Justice, you will recognise the particular poignance and the irony, perhaps, of those words coming from that author. One other anecdote, perhaps, will serve the case. Writing some time ago of the effect which the then Advocate Moseneke had on his life, another author recounted an incident from 1986. That author had just completed a rather unhappy stint doing back work at a conservative law firm in Pretoria. He was introduced to then Advocate Moseneke, who asked him about his future plans. And still unsettled by his unhappy apprenticeship, the author replied that he was thinking of journalism because clearly he was not cut out to be a lawyer. Advocate Moseneke disagreed and told him the country needed good human rights lawyers and that doing something worthwhile with his law degree would benefit the people of South Africa. And today, thanks to that conversation, the author is a professor of law and runs what is probably the best known blog in the country on constitutional and related issues. So in conclusion, Deputy Chief Justice, both as a jurist and as a person, you've touched lives, you have changed lives, and you've had a part, indeed, in shaping our society. And our society is the better for it. As you contemplate some well-deserved R&R, although listening to some of the speakers this morning, perhaps I'm not so sure about that now, and also your imminent travels through this continent, there can be no greater accolade than for you to acknowledge this accomplishment. So, Deputy Chief Justice, on behalf of the General Counsel of the Bar, we thank you for your immense contribution to the law and to the country, and we wish you and your family everything of the best for the future.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Next is the Director of Public Prosecutions, on behalf of the National Prosecuting Authority, Mr. Jauke.
Thank you, Chief Justice. I stand here as one representing one component of the criminal justice system, which is at odds with itself. But, Honorable Justice, Justices of the Constitutional Court, Deputy Minister of Justice, Mr. Jeffries, Chairperson of the Council of the National Provinces, Ms. Modisa, President Beki, President Mkaka, Moseneke family, all honorable judges present here, distinguished guests and all people of South Africa. Allow me on behalf of the National Prosecuting Authority to express our sincere gratitude to have been invited to share with you the farewell of one of the greatest legal minds South Africa has ever seen. We in the NPA were privileged to have worked with Honorable Chief Justice Moseneke, both when he was practicing as counsel and when he was the judge, as well as justice of his court. We have experienced these sharp legal critics of our processes as well as our presentation of cases before him, both in criminal courts as well as appeal courts. We are better placed today and into the future to conduct prosecution of matters without fear, favor, or prejudice, all because of his guidance and counsel. There are many experiences and memories that we can share with you regarding Honorable Justice Moseneke. We wish to thank Honorable Justice Moseneke for his service to South Africa and to humankind. The NPA would not have succeeded its endeavor were it not the guidance and assistance that Honorable Moseneke has given to us. Lastly, we wish to congratulate Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke. We wish him well in his retirement and hopefully other engagements within society and community at large. And sincerely hope you will remain a watchdog to the conduct and behavior of the NPA. I thank you.
On behalf of the executive of this country, I call upon the Deputy Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, Mr. John Jeffrey, MP.
Thank you very much, Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice, other justices of the Constitutional Court and other judges present, former presidents, Mbeki and Montante, all other distinguished guests. I'm standing in for the Minister of Justice, who's unfortunately out of the country. In a speech in May last year, Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke speaks about how in traditional African culture, the shade of a tree was the place where disputes of society were mediated and resolved. The community would meet for a lahutla, and there was room for all to have their say. Everyone participated in the process. This was how justice was done. It is what the Deputy Chief Justice calls the age-old concept of justice under a tree. He continues to say that the court we're in today is a gentle reminder of this. The overarching theme of the Constitutional Court building is justice under a tree, and as former Justice Sachs described it, the tree protects the people and the people look after the tree. There is a striking symbol of the synergy between justice and the people. Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke has dedicated a lifetime in protecting that tree. From the tender age of 13, he fought for what was right. In 1960, Dekhan Moseneke saw what had happened in Sharpeville, and he later recalled, and I quote, "The inequality was egregious. You could see it out there, jumping at you as a young person. My sense of fairness was inbred, and I think it's inbred in every child. And just remember the sense of right and wrong of young people. My grandchildren now tell me, 'Grandpa, why does he get 2 sweets and I only get 1? It's unfair, Grandpa.' The kids are the first to say it." It's the end of the quote. As a result of seeing the Sharpeville massacre, he decided to join the African Student Union. 3 years later, he was taken from his home by the police. For 90 days, he was tortured and held in solitary confinement. In many of the interviews and articles written about the Deputy Chief Justice, there is one person who stands out, his mother, Mrs. Karabo Moseneke. In a speech delivered in 2011, the Deputy Chief Justice says, and I quote, "Those who know me will tell you that my hero of all times is my mother." Mrs. Moseneke tells of how when he was detained in 1963, his family had no idea where he was being taken, and how they searched and searched. When Mrs. Moseneke eventually found out where he was about to stand trial. Every day the police would ask Mrs. Moseneke the same question, if she was number 6's mother, and every day she would give the same reply, "Tell them that I am the mother, I am definitely the mother." Then the guards would tell her that her son, number 6, was sure to hang. At his trial, his parents begged the judge not to send their son to jail, but Dekhan Moseneke was sentenced to 10 years in jail for conspiracy and sabotage. He became the youngest prisoner ever to be taken to Robben Island. Much has been said about the Deputy Chief Justice's academic achievements, in particular how he completed his matric, a BA in English and Political Science, and to be Juris whilst on the island, and later his LLB. We also know of his involvement in the now famous Makana Football Association while on the island. But what struck me most is how Mrs. Moseneke, being a school teacher, would only visit her son on the island during school holidays, and how she would drive all the way from Gauteng to Cape Town just to be able to see her son for only 30 minutes. She was so shocked by how hungry and emaciated he was. She tells of how she persuaded her warden to give her son a foil-wrapped roast chicken, which he devoured. She says, bones and all. His story is one of inspiration. The teenage political prisoner from Robben Island, by virtue of his razor-sharp intellect and his dedication to justice, became a candidate attorney, who became an attorney, He became an advocate, then a silk, then a High Court judge in 2001, a Constitutional Court judge in 2002, and he has served this country and its people as our Deputy Chief Justice since 2005. His achievements, accolades, awards and professional appointments are formidable. City Press in 2012, in an article about the Constitutional Court, writes the court consists of a progressive bench, including, and I quote, constitutional rock stars like Chief Justice Moseneke. Speaking from the side of the executive, our courts have over the past 2 decades held government accountable to ensure in particular that socio-economic rights of the poor and vulnerable, whether it be healthcare, housing, social grants or the eviction of homeless people, our courts under the able leadership of judges like the Deputy Chief Justice have not shied away from compelling government to do what the Constitution requires. We know him as a highly principled, fearless and outspoken jurist, one who never shies away from speaking his mind, one who pronounces on the law without fear, favour or prejudice, a man who's not afraid to speak truth to power. And I would argue that this is what makes him a constitutional rock star. It's his humanity. It's his ability to comprehend the human condition, to see human beings as human beings and not mere parties to litigation. And this makes Moseneke one of the most respected and astute legal minds in the history of our country. In his interview before the Judicial Services Commission in May 2005, he said in response to a question from Advocate Bezos, and I quote, "You see, talking about bitterness, Mr. Bezos, or the lack of it rather, that you talked about, it has been a rather difficult past. It has been a difficult past for all of us. Mine is just one small example, but it has been a difficult past for the whole nation. But once we came to where we are, not just me personally, our Constitution is reconciliatory. It is embracing, in fact, it is that embracing communal African value of accepting everyone for their worth. There is no time to waste hating others. There is all the time to require of them to help us change and reconstruct this country in a non-racial, non-sexist environment. And that is where my strength personally comes from, and I think that is the strength that informs our Constitution and that informs all of us." End of quote. Ladies and gentlemen, on a lighter note, many things have been said about the Deputy Chief Justice, but one that you maybe didn't know is that in March this year I received a memorandum requesting me to appoint him as an acting additional magistrate for Randburg. It was only for one day, and it was in order for him to solemnize a marriage, but there was an acting additional magistrate. So Deputy Chief Justice, you know you can only play so much golf in one's retirement, so if at any stage in the future you may feel that you missed the courts, we can perhaps always revisit that appointment for Randburg. I learned from the former Minister of Justice, Jeff Hadebe, that the Deputy Chief Justice not only learned mathematics from his father, but also a love of tennis and ballroom dancing. So the producers of Strictly Come Dancing. Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke is also the only judge, as far as I'm aware, who has a rose named after him. And that the rose should carry the Deputy Chief Justice's name is very apt, because the Dikhan Moseneke rose is described as a red garden-cap rose with buds of scarlet red which develop into full blooms. They are long-lasting and each are carried on strong stems. It is vigorous and very prolific. After the pain and thorns of institutionalized apartheid, our constitutional democracy and human rights jurisprudence in particular have blossomed. Just as the rose has carried on strong stems, so too have we great legal minds like Dikhan Moseneke, who have been the strong stems that uphold our constitution. Like this rose has been described as vigorous, so has the Deputy Chief Justice been vigorous in his pursuit of the rule of law, the attainment of human rights, and of justice for all. So, Deputy Chief Justice, as we honour you here today, I want to present you with the rose that carries your name. There's a label here which says Dikhan Moseneke. That's the name of the rose. When you plant it in your garden, every time you see it bloom, And apologies, Chief Justice, I haven't complied with, I think it's Rule 26, but when you planted in your garden every time you said bloom, please know that your legacy and your contribution to our Constitution and our country is invaluable. We wish you all the best in your retirement. May you enjoy the time to spend with your wife, your children, and your grandchildren. We salute you and your enormous contribution to the freedom that we enjoy today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. You know, I almost said to the chairperson of the NCOP, is it parliamentary for a member of the executive to present a gift to a member? Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. Next, on behalf of Parliament, is the chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Meta Dimudise.
Chief Justice, former President Mbeki, former President Muhlandi, Justices of the Constitutional Court, members of the Judiciary, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I confess when I was first told about an invitation to attend, without reading it, I got very agitated. Until my staff looked at me and said, "Ma'am, you are not being summoned to court." And as one of them said, he said, "It is an unjudicial judicial invitation," which led more to my confusion. My fear was, however, not irrational, judges, because you've got to remember how many times the Speaker of the National Assembly and myself have been to court in this last year. So I was very relieved that it was not one of those. I want to thank you, Chief Justice, for the invitation to the Speaker and I to represent Parliament in bidding farewell to the Deputy Chief Justice, Radical Ernest Moseneke. It is not every day that we get this privilege to bid farewell to a freedom fighter, a fellow ex-political prisoner, a legal practitioner, a former businessman, and a judge. Truly, we are honored to say a few words to a brother, to a father, to a leader, to a citizen who has dedicated his life to serving his people. This is the man who first set foot in a courtroom at the age of 14 as an accused for wanting to set South Africa free. It is that foot that has left the indelible footprint on our court system. I do not know, ladies and gentlemen, how many of the judges today in South Africa or anywhere else in the world who could boast of such a record. An accused and enough, as not only a judge, but the Deputy Chief Justice of the country. We salute you, sir, for your contribution to South Africa. You served in the technical committee that gave us a constitution which is still revered in the world. You also served in the IEC, which delivered the first democratic elections of South Africa. We cannot forget that you became a permanent judge the first time in 2001, a Deputy Chief Justice in 2005. Ironically, you then went on to replace Judge Krishna, who you had deputized in the IEC. Even as you became judge, you had succeeded as a litigant in having South Africa's racially discriminatory system of state administration declared constitutionally invalid. This, for me, was the first light that said, indeed, Sikon is portion. Ironically as it may sound, Parliament always values the advice that you, Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice, now regularly dish out to us, especially on those cases where we are cited. We listen to your reasons, and we are committed to implement and to honor them. We do so because we understand the role of the judiciary, that it is not only to interpret the laws, but sometimes it is to help us to meander through the processes, the procedures, and the interpersonal relations which sometimes just become too difficult for people who, for whatever reasons, are standing at the opposite sides of the table. So we always want to say to you, do your job independently, do your job, and know that we do appreciate. We appreciate the judiciary because the crafters of our Constitution were very clever indeed, that sometimes it is Parliament that thinks it is the balancing leg. But sometimes, and more recently, we have found that the judiciary creates that space to bring us all back together. We appreciate that. And it is also important for us to say that we must not forget as South Africans that even though we are referred to as parliamentarians, as lawmakers, not all of us are lawyers. There is no requirement that I am a lawyer in the South African system. It is also important to recognize that all judges must be lawyers first. And it is that balance, the fact that lawyers are trained, and in my own young Aleman's language, they are the technicians in the field that I find myself in. It is important that I rely that any time they interpret for me and for the general public correctly. So we appreciate that. Moseneke, we are very happy that we've been part of the movement against our sorry past, subjugation, humiliation, whatever. We are even proud that you are part of the democratization of our country. I was told once by Comrade Kenjin so that, judges don't really retire. She said, Mafana Nama Pep, you fire them away until you need to take them out. So in that period of them being fired away, we expect that it is not only your character that you will keep beyond reproach as it is today, and that you will keep your nose also clean, my brother. We hope that you continue, and we continue to seek your wise counsel. We hope that as Parliament, we will continue to look at all the sacrifices, not only of Justice Moseneke, but of all the men and women of South Africa, known and unknown, who have given so much of themselves to enable us to gather here today and to say goodbye to one of our own. We wish you and your family happy years ahead. But I spoke to a few prisoners last night. And they said I should make a suggestion to the retired Chief Justice, Deputy Chief Justice. They said, I should ask you whether you are considering, since one of our own has put a foothold in FIFA, whether you would continue, whether you would consider to avail yourself for the FIFA's disciplinary committee. Because we think they are soon going to need a very serious. And they say that this is because you did admirably well in the Makana disciplinary committee. I thank you, Chief Justice.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Well, the moment we've been waiting for has arrived. is now time to hear from the man himself. Over to you, Leon.
Chief Justice of the Republic, Moseneke, former President Thabo Mbeki, former President Moseneke, indeed President and Deputy President of the SCA, Justices of our court, the Constitutional Court, both current, this sitting and retired, Judges, President, heads of courts, and judges of all our courts, members, I could rightly call you comrade, fellow prisoner. Very happy. Deputy Minister, I'll have more to say about you a little later, but thank you. Leaders of political parties and other social movements, all formations within the legal fraternity, deans of law schools, made a point of them here, members of my family, and in particular my wife, Kabonina, and my mother, Karabo, Moseneke. Thank you so much. Allow me also to welcome all patriots, compatriots, and citizens of our land and friends who have cared to come and observe this moment with us. I cease to hold office as Deputy Chief Justice of the Republic, and I retire from the Constitutional Court of South Africa at midnight today, the 20th of November, 2016. I've had the distinct privilege of serving the judicial bench for 15 years, of which no less than a continuous period of 14 years in the highest court in our land. A formal ceremony such as the present is by now well etched in our judicial convention. The judiciary knows no better way of celebrating and sending off one of its own than in the very forum in which it dispenses justice. It is a time-honored tradition that on an occasion as the present, fellow colleagues who hold judicial office would row, so would counsel, and be in attendance as a mark of homage to imparting justice. And that explains why Impart this morning commenced with an actual court sitting in which I had the honor of delivering my last judgment ever in this court. It is a symbolic way of a final salute, or if you want to change the imagery, it is a moment to discard one's robes and gable. In a formal farewell such as the present, I am truly grateful to representatives of the General Counsel of the Bar, Advocate Jeremy Miller, SC. I'm thankful. Just surprised at the amount of research you've done on me. You delivered an eulogy on behalf of advocates of our country. I'm grateful to Mkherasi Mvuso Notesi, President of NADEL and indeed of the Law Society of South Africa, again representing progressive lawyers in Ireland, NADEL, in which I had a part to form, as you know, I'm a founding member of NADEL. So you're in the right space. And indeed, you also represent the Law Society of South Africa, which represents in turn all the attorneys of our entire republic. I'm grateful to you, Advocate Jauke, from the National Prosecuting Authority, and we heard you quite clearly, without fear or favor. In deep recognition that in our constitutional arrangements, the judiciary is part of an arm of the state, a formal ceremony such as the President will be hardly complete without the high representatives and leaders of our legislatures and our executive arms of the state. I'm humbled and delighted by the tribute of the Honorable Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Honorable Tandi Budise MP. I was myself afraid that you might go, order. As you know, my normal job is that here we don't have to say it. Here we speak one person at a time. And those who are errant, we remind them very quickly that here we speak one at a time. Freedom fighter in your own right, fellow prisoner and a leader. We're equally pleased to receive you, Deputy Minister, Justice and Contempt Development. You have an incredible mind. You've been one of the consumers and sometimes sharp critics of my judgments and papers. It has been a wonderful intellectual banter you and I have had that has led to considerable fondness. Because if we were to differ, we differ on a rational plane, mental limits, not only a rational basis of mere emotions. So really thank you. The rose will find a place of pride in our garden. I didn't forget it existed. There's a tribute from some people who thought I deserved to be named after a rose. But thank you so much. I would like to move on to thank deans of law schools. Legal education for young and indeed for sitting judges and magistrates has been my passion. Chief Justice talked a little about it and of the work that we do. The proud judiciary we have is an outcome of hard work to continue to instill and to locate those values in those that hold office so high. And throughout my stay on the bench, I found time to lecture at law schools. Almost all of them I have been, and I see deans of different law schools can attest to that. I'd like to thank you for having given me my intellectual and academic side to find space. And most of the articles that we quoted here were delivered mainly at law schools. And I am grateful for that space, and I thank you for coming out here. All our colleagues in Chapter 9 institutions, continue as you do to protect and advance our constitutional democracy. But you've honored us by being here. I've seen the leader of the Human Rights Commission, the leader of the Office of the Public Protector, indeed of the Electoral Commission, and all of these are very important for who and what we are as a people. I won't spend time today to acknowledge my family. I did that to my heart's content last night. I move on. I have talked a little about my life story last night at the dinner held by the Chief Justice in my honor.
A very good afternoon. You're watching the Midday Report.
Lunchtime news amplified.
But for now, this is what they call home. Their hope to shift to a higher ground seems to be against the tide.
Midday Report provides you with more than just news stories.
I just want Port Elizabeth to know that they own a world-class theatre.
Good afternoon. You're with the news at 1 in the headlines.
Very good afternoon to you. This is News Live. I'm Natasha Thorpe. Let's take a quick look at what's coming up in your headlines.
Good afternoon and welcome to A View from the House.
For all things news, tune in to Midday Report weekdays at 12 noon only on the SABC News channel.
One other person has been shot dead and another is in a critical condition in hospital.
The CRL has laid charges against controversial televangelist Paseka Moseneke.
More than 1.3 million South Africans have been added in the past two registration weekends.
The International Monetary Fund warns that policy uncertainty could dampen economic growth in South Africa.
And all eyes are on the new Bok coach, Alistair Coetzee. His challenge to keep everyone in the country happy.
Bupilong, we celebrate those who take strides doing good and changing the world.
I really think that education has to be revisited, and it's an integral part of teaching young people skills of the future.
There's always light at the end of the tunnel.
I think that the treatment should be made available, actually, because it's costly. Growth hormones are very costly.
Where there is a challenge, we bring hope.
I'm alive. And the brain tumor is gone.
Join your host Puleng Mulabati every Friday at 17:30 for more uplifting stories.
A very good afternoon. You're watching the